Hello and good morning. Now, to be honest, when I found out that this was the passage that I was going to be preaching on, I said yes, and then I regretted saying yes because I read the passage and thought there was nothing that I could talk about. But I do have to say it's all been made better by the fact that I get to wear a Britney mic, so it's all worth it. But when I started reading through the passage, there was one thing that sort of spoke to me, and that one thing that was like a theme that run through each of the characters through this little passage, and it was about their expectations, which I think when we read this passage and when we think about this passage, it's often, we do it in the nativity when like 3 little boys or girls come with their like wrapped up shoe boxes or whatever as gifts, but then in my personal opinion nothing else is sort of spoken about it. It doesn't go any further than that, and I can sort of see why when I was reading through it, because it seems like there's nothing much other than this idea of expectations. So Herod expected himself to be the one true leader. He was consumed by material goods and his earthly title. He was consumed by his own power, and his expectation was that it would stay that way. He didn't expect anyone to come and try and overtake this powerful man. However, he then found these wise men searching for a new king, searching for somebody who was going to take over his power. And he was disturbed, or in the Bible reading that my mum just read, shaken to the core, because someone was messing with his expectation. And I feel like 2020 was a little bit like that. I'm sure at the end of 2019, many of us expected it to be our year, to be my year, the best year yet, the one for the new job, the one for which we were going to become fitter, healthier, more productive, the year in which we were maybe going to fix those family issues, maybe see more of our children, our grandchildren, our family, our friends. 2020 was meant to be our year. That was our expectation. And, well, we all know how that one turned out. I don't think any of us saw 2020 coming the way that it did, and the way that it changed our lives forever. From the new lingo to words like bubbles or Zoom or tears, like who even knew what they were in 2019? Or the oddity of having to wear like face masks in public, in shops and even in churches like this. And I don't know if anybody else gets this, but I get really stressed when I'm watching a film or I'm watching a TV show and they like hug each other or they come too close or even like they dare to kiss. I'm like, do they not know about social distancing? It really stresses me out. Thanks to 2020, our lives changed forever. And most of us, if not all of us, had to go through heartbreak of some shape or form due to the madness that was 2020. And I'm certain that, like Herod, some of us think back to 2020 and some of us will be disturbed or even shaken to the core of what we had to go through. The wise men also had their expectations, and they're seen through this passage. They took a journey of faith and they travelled a long way to come and see a king. They knew what they were looking for in the sky. They knew that the star that they saw highlighted something special, and they knew it was worth the journey. They expected great things because of the small sign that they saw in the sky. And when they came to Jerusalem, they had this expectation of excitement that they were going to meet this promised king. But when they got to Jerusalem, Jesus wasn't there. The wise men's expectations meant that Jesus was going to be born in the capital. He was going to be born in the centre, the place of royalty, the place in which those who reigned lived. Their expectation was that Jesus was to be born with a crown on his head, not in a small, insignificant town in Bethlehem, surrounded by animals and placed in a manger. Jerusalem is where the wise men expected Jesus to be. Their expectations placed the king in a palace in the capital, surrounded by royalty and other rulers. And their expectations meant that they took their eyes away from the star that had been guiding them for so long and onto their humanly expectations of what a king looked like. They took their eyes away from the sky and onto their earthly expectations. Jesus was a hidden gem. He was born in the most ordinary of places by the most normal of people. But he was born for great things. And one thing that we know from reading the whole story of Jesus' birth is that Jesus brought about change. He redefined people's expectations, he tore down stereotypes, and he tore down rules and regulations, and he made it about a relationship with God, not a strict religion. And maybe as we look to the year ahead, we are living with this expectation of excitement. Maybe we're excited that things could be different this year and we're ready for change. But in all of this excitement and expectation for change, have we taken our eyes off the guide? Have we taken our eyes off the thing that's guiding us? Like the wise men in their excitement, have we looked down to an earthly level and taken our eyes away from the star that has been guiding us and leading us to our destination? 2020 was like nothing we expected, but it's a journey that each of us had to go through. And the good news is that God never left our side throughout the whole thing. And maybe you are like Herod in this, that the way that you lived in 2020, you're feeling quite attacked and you're feeling quite vulnerable and worried for the year ahead. Maybe you're still trying to pick up the pieces of what happened in 2020. Or maybe you're not excited for this new year, but you're just worried and afraid or distressed even. I'd say that we could liken the season that we're living in today to the season of the Israelites as they were coming out of Egypt. Egypt was a place of isolation, a place of slavery and pain for the Egyptians, and they had no idea what they were traveling into when they left Egypt. They just got up and left. They had no idea what was in store for them. They didn't know if this change was going to be a positive one or a negative one, but they travelled nonetheless. As we leave 2020 behind and enter 2021, we might feel like the Israelites did. Some nervous, some anxious, some excited, some ready for change. And I'm sure that some of them didn't even know what to think. I'm sure some of them were just following the crowd. And I think the best thing about the Bible is that we can read passages like this of the Israelites or Jesus' birth, and we can know the ending. We know that God was with his people throughout their whole journey out of Egypt. He was a pillar of light that guided them through the night, a cloud that protected them in the day. He was a God who provided food for them daily. We know that God was with them, protecting them and for them. So let's follow the example of the Israelites, that they followed God blindly into the wilderness. We too can follow God blindly into this new year. No matter if we're nervous, excited, or scared, or even annoyed, we could still follow God blindly. However, unlike Herod, who put his expectations on his own power and ability, or unlike letting the expectations of our excitement, like the wise men, take our eyes off what's guiding them, this year, let's just try and expect God. Let's expect his presence. Let's expect his love, his grace, his redemption, his forgiveness, his freedom. Let's make this year not a year of earthly or worldly or material expectations, but a year in which we just expect God. Because that's one thing that we can always count on. God will never let us down. Psalm 34 verse 5 says, "Those who look to him are radiant, their faces will never be covered with shame." Let's look to God with our expectations for this year and let ourselves glow with his radiance and with his light. The birth of Jesus was the best thing to happen to this world, and the wise men were right to make their journey, to travel, to go and praise this new king. This king whose birth, life, and death brought humanity redemption, grace, and a personal relationship with God. And as much as Herod hated it, for us it was the best thing to happen. And who knows that maybe in a few years' time, we are going to be able to look back at 2020 and be thankful for the positive impact that it made.